It was a Wednesday morning like any other. I was settling into my workday, still tasting the bitter remnants of my too hot coffee when my phone buzzed on the corner of my desk. The screen flashed a number I didn't recognize. No caller ID, just a string of digits that felt as anonymous as a stranger's face in a crowded subway. I almost let it ring out, but something in me, maybe that old ingrained sense of responsibility, made me swipe to answer. Hello? Is this Callie Thompson? The voice on the other end asked, crisp and professional. I hesitated, a strange chill creeping into my chest. Yes, this is Callie. This is Marcus from Crestview National Bank. We're calling regarding your mortgage balance of $487,000. We've sent several notices, but our records show no response. I felt my pulse spike, my grip on the phone tightening. I don't have a mortgage. I replied, sharper than I intended. You must have the wrong person. There was a pause, the kind that stretched too long, like a breath held on a tightrope. Ma'am, this account is registered under your full name, date of birth, and social security number. It was opened 4 years ago. 4 years, my mind raced, struggling to catch up. 4 years ago, I was just settling into my first real job, saving every penny for my first apartment. Not a sprawling house I'd never seen. It made no sense. I think you have a mistake, I said, my voice lower now, tinged with unease. I've never owned a house. I understand this is unexpected, Marcus continued, his tone slipping into a practiced sympathy. But our records are clear. The loan was secured in your name. I ended the call without another word, my heart thudding in my chest. My mind flicked through the last few years, trying to make sense of this impossible mistake. I thought of my younger brother Jake, his dreams of flipping houses, his endless talks about real estate deals and fixer-uppers. He had always been the risk-taker, the dreamer, the one with a plan for everything. I'd helped him fill out FAFSA forms, co-signed student loans, and even fronted cash for his first car when our parents couldn't. But a mortgage. No, he wouldn't have, or would he? I opened my laptop, the screen glaring back at me as I pulled up my bank's website. The transactions were routine rent, groceries, a few too many takeout orders. But then I found it buried deep in my inbox, an email from Crestview National I had ignored months ago, assuming it was junk. I clicked it open, my stomach twisting as the words swam before my eyes. Dear Callie Thompson, thank you for your recent inquiry regarding your mortgage account. As the primary borrower, you are responsible for the balance of $487,000. If you have questions regarding your payment schedule or interest rate, please contact us. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a scam email. This was real. I spent the next hour tearing through old files, pulling out tax returns, student loan documents, and every scrap of financial paper I had. My heart pounded louder with each piece of paper I flipped through. I found old forms I'd signed co-signing for Jake's college loans, helping him get his first car, opening joint accounts when he needed a leg up. My signature, my social security number, my name, my life wrapped around his needs. That's when I found it. A copy of a title deed. My name, my date of birth. My signature neatly typed beside a property address I didn't recognize. My mind spiraled back to that summer 4 years ago. Jake had just come back from a real estate conference, his head full of ideas, his eyes shining with ambition. He had pulled me aside at a family barbecue, drunk on cheap beer and dreams, talking about the next big thing. I had smiled, proud of his confidence, his unbreakable optimism. I should have known better. I sank to the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and the distant hum of my refrigerator. My pulse thudded in my ears. My thoughts, a chaotic loop of betrayal and disbelief. Jake had always been the golden child, the one who took risks, and somehow always landed on his feet. I had been the reliable one, the one who cleaned up his messes, who stood in the background and clapped while he took the stage. And now, without a word, without even a hint, he had pulled me into his latest scheme. But this was different. This wasn't a minor slip or a petty lie. This was my life, my future, my financial stability on the line. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a mortgage. It was about trust. It was about family. It was about betrayal. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as the realization settled over me like a cold, wet blanket. My own brother had forged my name, signed me into $500,000 of debt, and never said a word. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I felt a slow, simmering anger. Not the kind that burns bright and fades, but the kind that settles deep, hardening into resolve. I would not let this go. Not this time. I stood, my legs shaky, but my mind clear. If Jake thought I would just roll over and take this, he had forgotten who I really was. I would gather my proof piece by piece, and when the time came, I would make sure he felt every ounce of this betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt a calm, cold certainty I wasn't just going to get even. I was going to get ahead. And this time I wasn't doing it for anyone else but me. I barely slept that night, my mind tangled in a web of disbelief and rising anger. By morning, the shock had hardened into something sharper, a need for answers. I dug deeper, pulling up every financial document I had, from student loan agreements to old tax forms. My signature, the one I had so freely given for years, felt like a ghost haunting every page. I didn't just find one document, I found dozens: co-signed car loans, joint credit applications, medical forms, all the tiny, invisible ties that bind you to someone you trust. And there, buried in the stack, was a thick envelope from Crestview National, postmarked nearly 3 years ago. I had tossed it into a drawer without a second glance, assuming it was junk mail or some generic offer. My hands trembled as I pulled the papers free, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. It was the full mortgage packet, pages and pages of tightly printed legal text, all of it neatly wrapped in a thick, crisp cover letter. My name sat in bold letters at the top alongside a property address I had never visited. I forced myself to slow down, reading each line, my mind refusing to believe what my eyes confirmed. This was no mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated act. Jake had used my name, my credit, my trust to secure a nearly $500,000 mortgage. The signature at the bottom of the loan documents was mine, or at least close enough to fool a bank clerk. It was too neat, too confident, lacking the slight wobble in my R and the tight loop in my Y. Someone had either practiced or forged it outright. And as much as I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe I had somehow signed something in a moment of distraction, I knew better. Jake had always been good at convincing people. He could talk his way into anything: a better grade, a free upgrade, a second chance. And apparently, he had talked his way into my financial future, locking me into a mountain of debt without my knowledge. I spent the next few hours in a haze, making calls, pulling my credit report, digging into every corner of my financial life. It was worse than I had imagined. Not only had Jake taken out the mortgage, but he had also used my information to secure a second line of credit, pulling cash to cover renovations and upgrades. He had built a life on my back, brick by stolen brick, and I hadn't even noticed. When I finally hit a wall, my eyes burning from hours of screen glare and my throat tight with unshed tears, I called my best friend Zoe. She picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and curious. "Hey, Callie, what's up? You sound out of breath." I hesitated, the words thick in my throat. How do you even start a conversation like this? How do you tell someone you've just discovered the person you trusted most has betrayed you in the most profound way? "Zoe," I managed, my voice trembling, "I think Jake stole my identity." She was silent for a beat, the line crackling with the sound of her breathing. Then, in a voice low and deadly serious, she said, "I'm coming over." When she arrived, I was still on the floor, papers spread around me like the aftermath of a financial tornado. Zoe took one look at my face, the red rims of my eyes, the scattered documents, and sank down beside me. She pulled me into a tight hug, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold knot in my chest. "Tell me everything," she whispered. And I did. I walked her through every form, every signature, every misstep. I laid out the twisted, tangled mess my brother had made of my life, the debts he had tied to my name, the lies he had spun with my trust as his safety net. When I finished, Zoe leaned back, her dark eyes sharp, her jaw tight. "We're not letting this slide," she said, her voice low and fierce. "He wants to use you like a stepping stone. Fine. Let's make sure he drowns in his own lies." Something in her words sparked a fire in me, a tiny ember of the old fierce Callie I had forgotten existed. I looked around at the scattered papers, the life I had built, the life Jake had tried to steal. And for the first time since that call, I felt something other than despair. I felt ready. Ready to fight, ready to take back what was mine. And as I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of Jake's betrayal, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about reclaiming my life piece by piece until there was nothing left of his lies but the ashes of his own arrogance. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My anger had sharpened into a quiet, focused determination. I wasn't just going to dig myself out of this mess. I was going to make sure Jake felt every ripple of his betrayal. I started by calling Crestview National this time prepared. I spoke to a woman named Denise, her voice crisp and polite, clearly used to the routine of financial disputes. "Hi, Denise," I said, my tone steady, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "I'd like to request a full account history and all related documents for the mortgage in my name, including, but not limited to, the original loan application closing documents and any credit checks performed at the time." There was a pause, a faint click of a keyboard in the background. I could almost picture her brow furrowed, scrolling through my account. "Of course," she replied, her tone professional but cautious. "I can send you a copy of the original loan packet. However, to make any formal disputes, you'll need to provide identification and a signed affidavit, stating that this account was opened without your consent." "That won't be a problem," I replied, trying to keep the cold edge out of my voice. I didn't want to come across as a victim. I wanted her to know I meant business. After hanging up, I pulled out a fresh legal pad and started drafting a list of every step I needed to take. I wasn't just reacting, I was planning, and that felt like the first real step toward taking back control. File a police report for identity theft. Freeze my credit with all 3 major bureaus. Contact a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud. Gather every piece of evidence I had. Emails, old signatures, tax returns. Confront Jake, but only when I had everything lined up. By the time I finished, the sun had shifted across the sky, casting long shadows through my living room window. I leaned back, stretching the stiffness from my shoulders, and felt a small, fierce spark of pride. This was the part of me I had forgotten, the Callie who didn't back down, who didn't let anyone push her around. That evening, Zoe swung by again, a bottle of wine in one hand and a stack of manila folders in the other. She dropped them on my coffee table with a grin. "Research," she said, dropping onto the couch beside me. "I spent all afternoon digging through public records and mortgage databases. I've got property deeds, tax assessments, and even some old newspaper clippings about the renovations Jake bragged about." I stared at the pile, my heart swelling with gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered, my throat tight. "Callie, you're my best friend," she shot back, unscrewing the wine bottle with a flourish. "And if there's one thing I hate, it's a snake in the grass. Jake picked the wrong person to mess with." We spent the next few hours combing through the documents, piecing together the timeline of Jake's deception. It was worse than I had imagined. Not only had he forged my name on the mortgage, but he had also taken out a second home equity line of credit, pulling nearly $50,000 for upgrades and furniture. He had sunk my name, my future, into his personal real estate empire without a second thought. "He must have thought you'd never find out," Zoe muttered, pouring us each a fresh glass of wine. "Or worse, that you'd just forgive him if you did." I leaned back, the wine warm in my chest, my mind spinning with 1,000 half-formed plans. "He's always thought that," I replied, my voice flat, "that I'd just keep picking up the pieces, that I'd let it slide because he's family." "Not this time," Zoe said, her eyes narrowing. "Not this time." The next morning, I filed the police report. The officer at the station was a tired-looking woman in her late 40s, her hair pulled back into a tight, no-nonsense bun. She listened as I laid out the basics of my case, nodding occasionally, her pen scratching across a blank report form. "This isn't the first family fraud case I've seen," she said, glancing up at me over the rim of her reading glasses. But it's one of the more extensive. You're doing the right thing by getting this on record. I nodded, the weight of my decision settling in my chest. This wasn't just a messy family fight. This was a crime, plain and simple, and I was done pretending it wasn't. I left the station feeling lighter, a strange, almost giddy sense of freedom washing over me. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking action. I was moving forward, one small, deliberate step at a time. That night, I sat down with Zoe, our laptops glowing in the darkness, and we drafted the first of many formal letters. Dispute notices, demand letters, cease and desist orders, each one a nail in the coffin of Jake's plans. And as I signed my name at the bottom of each letter, my pen pressing deep into the paper, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Power. Real undeniable power. Jake had tried to steal my future, but he had underestimated me. And by the time I was finished, he would regret every signature, every lie, every stolen dollar. I was done being the quiet, reliable sister I was, done cleaning up his messes. It was my turn to make a mess, and I was just getting started. A week passed each day, pulling me deeper into the twisted web of my brother's deceit. I had filed the police report, frozen my credit, and started piecing together the paper trail that would prove my case. I knew I couldn't confront Jake until I had everything in place, but the waiting, the pretending, it ate at me. I was living a double life, one where I smiled through family group chats and liked his Instagram posts about hustle culture and entrepreneurial freedom, while privately building the case that would tear his world apart. It was Zoe who finally broke the stalemate. We were sitting on my balcony, the early evening air cool against our faces, as we watched the sun dip behind the city skyline. She took a long sip from her wine glass, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "You're going to have to confront him eventually," she said, her voice steady but edged with concern. "You can't just let him keep walking around like he's untouchable." I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging in the cool air. She was right. Of course, I had all the documents now, the forged signatures, the fraudulent applications, the trail of financial breadcrumbs that led straight to Jake's door. But I hadn't been able to pull the trigger. I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. "Once I confront him, there's no going back. This will blow up our entire family." Zoe leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Callie, he already blew it up. You're just lighting the match." Her words hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. She was right. Jake had made this mess, not me. I was just refusing to be his silent victim. "All right," I said, setting my glass down with a determined clink. "Let's do this." The next day, I sent Jake a text, short, simple, to the point. "Hey, can you meet me at Mom and Dad's on Sunday? I need to talk to you." He replied within minutes. "Of course, everything okay?" I stared at his response, the casual, almost cheerful tone sparking a fresh wave of anger. How could he be so oblivious, so confident that his little sister would just roll over and accept his betrayal without a fight? "Yeah, just some family stuff. See you Sunday." The rest of the week crawled by, each day stretching into an endless loop of tension and tightly coiled nerves. I avoided the family group chat, ignored Jake's random memes and TikTok shares, and instead focused on tightening every piece of my case. I copied files, printed emails, and backed up every scrap of evidence onto a secure hard drive. When Sunday finally arrived, I drove to my parents' house in a fog of dread and simmering anger. The driveway was full. My mom's old Subaru, Dad's pickup, and Jake's shiny new Audi parked dead center, gleaming in the morning sun like a polished lie. I paused at the front door, my hand hovering over the worn brass handle. For a brief, cowardly moment, I considered turning around, driving back to my apartment, and pretending this nightmare never happened. But then I remembered the mortgage statement, the forged signatures, the weight of a $487,000 debt hanging around my neck. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house smelled like Sunday, a blend of fresh coffee bacon and my mom's lavender-scented cleaning spray. Jake's laughter echoed from the kitchen, loud and carefree, mingling with the clatter of plates and the low hum of my father's baritone. I felt my stomach twist, a sick blend of nostalgia and betrayal churning in my gut. Jake looked up as I stepped into the kitchen, his face splitting into a wide, boyish grin. He reached over to pull me into a side hug, his arm heavy and warm around my shoulders. "Hey, sis, long time no see," he said, his voice dripping with the same easy charm that had fooled me for years. I forced a tight smile slipping out of his grasp and moving to lean against the counter. My parents glanced over their faces, bright with the kind of uncomplicated warmth that only ignorance allows. "Hey, Callie," Mom said, her hands busy cracking eggs into a sizzling pan. "You want some breakfast? We're making all your favorites, bacon scrambled eggs, and those hash browns you like." I shook my head, my mouth dry. "I'm good, I need to talk to Jake alone." The kitchen fell silent, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. Jake shot me a puzzled glance, his brow furrowing. "Sure," he said slowly, setting his mug down. "Let's head out back." I followed him through the sliding glass doors and onto the back porch. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves on the old oak tree rustling like whispered accusations. Jake leaned against the wooden railing, his arms crossed his face, the picture of relaxed curiosity. "So what's up?" he asked, his head tilting slightly, that same easy grin still fixed in place. I took a deep breath, my heart thudding like a war drum in my chest. "This was it. I know what you did," I said. My voice steady, the words slicing through the cool air like a blade. Jake's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my bag, pulling out the thick folder of evidence I had prepared. I dropped it onto the small, weathered table between us, the pages rustling like the leaves overhead. "This," I said, my voice low but firm, "your mortgage, your debt, all of it in my name." He froze, his face paling as he stared down at the folder. For a moment, he looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, wide-eyed and breathless. "Callie," he started, his voice thin and strained. "I can explain." "Don't," I snapped, my own voice surprising me with its edge. "Don't you dare try to spin this. You stole my identity, Jake. You forged my name, tied me to $500,000 of debt, and never said a word. Do you have any idea what you've done?" For the first time, I saw real fear flicker across his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw working like he was chewing on broken glass. I felt my pulse slow, my anger solidifying into something cold and immovable. This was just the beginning. Jake stared at the thick folder on the table, his face a twisted mix of shock, fear, and poorly masked guilt. I watched as the gears turned in his mind, his eyes flicking between my clenched jaw and the stack of papers that held the proof of his betrayal. "Callie," he said, his voice cracking. "I can explain this. It's not what you think." I almost laughed at that, the absurdity of his words hitting me like a slap. Not what I think. I had spent weeks unraveling his lies, piecing together the financial jigsaw puzzle he had created behind my back. There was no mistake. "Save it." I cut in, my tone sharp enough to slice through the cool autumn air. "You forged my name, Jake? You used my credit, my trust to secure a mortgage and a line of credit without my permission? Do you have any idea what you've done to my life?" He straightened his shoulders, tightening defensively, the old stubborn Jake surfacing. "Look, it's not like that," he said, his hands coming up as if he could physically push the truth away. I needed a way to secure the property. It was an investment, a smart one, and I didn't have the credit to do it myself." "So you stole mine?" I shot back, my voice rising. I took a step closer, the wood of the porch creaking beneath my feet. "You didn't even ask, Jake. You didn't give me a choice. You just decided my life, my financial future was yours to gamble with." He flinched, his jaw tightening, the color draining from his face. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of the old protective sympathy I used to feel for him. The little brother I had covered for, defended, and cleaned up after. But then I remembered the numbers, the years of debt he had dumped on my shoulders without a second thought. And that flicker of sympathy turned to cold, hard steel. "I was going to pay it back," he stammered, his hands dropping to his sides, fingers flexing as if he might try to reach for the papers. "Once the house sold, I was going to pay it back. I just needed a little time." "A little time," I echoed, the words sour in my mouth. "Jake, you've buried me in nearly $500,000 of debt. You've tanked my credit, put my financial future at risk, and for what? A property flip, a gamble. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his eyes darting to the side as if looking for an escape. I felt a bitter satisfaction watching him squirm, his usual confidence crumbling under the weight of his own lies. "Why didn't you just ask me?" I continued, my voice dropping into a low, dangerous whisper. "Why not come to me, your sister, and just ask for help?" He met my eyes, then his expression hardening, a flash of something like anger crossing his face. "Because you would have said no," he spat, his voice trembling with a mix of shame and defiance. "You always act like you're better than me, like you've got everything together, like I'm just this screw-up who can't do anything right. You wouldn't have helped me. You never do." I took a step back, the words hitting me like a physical blow. He actually believed that he had convinced himself that I was the villain in his story. The cold, unfeeling sister who wouldn't lift a finger to help him. "That's not fair," I whispered, my throat tightening. "I've helped you more times than I can count. I've co-signed loans, covered your car insurance, lent you money when you couldn't make rent. I've been there for you, Jake. But this is different." He looked away, his jaw set, the muscles in his neck twitching as he swallowed hard. I could see the wheels turning, the panic starting to creep into his eyes as the full weight of his actions settled over him. "Callie," he said, his voice low and pleading now, his earlier anger fading into desperation. "Please don't do this. We're family. We can work this out. Just give me a chance to fix this." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, my fists clenching at my sides. "Family?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You used me, Jake. You took my trust, my name, and twisted it into a financial noose around my neck. That's not family. That's betrayal." He took a step forward, his hands outstretched, his eyes wide and pleading. "Callie, please, I'll make this right, I promise. Just give me a chance." I felt my heart harden, the last traces of sibling loyalty turning to stone. I reached down, picked up the folder, and hugged it to my chest, the papers crinkling beneath my grip. "You had your chance," I said, my voice flat and cold. "You made your choice when you forged my name. Now you get to live with the consequences." I turned on my heel, my boots thudding against the wooden planks of the porch as I walked away. I felt his eyes on my back, the weight of his fear and regret hanging in the air between us like a storm cloud. As I reached the door, I paused, my hand on the glass, and glanced back over my shoulder. Jake stood frozen, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Good luck, Jake," I said, my voice dripping with the cold satisfaction of long overdue justice. "You're going to need it." I stepped back into the warmth of my parents' kitchen, the sound of my mother's laughter, and my father's low hum of approval wrapping around me like a familiar, bittersweet blanket. But this time I felt no comfort. I had severed the last thread of trust that bound me to my brother, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I drove home that afternoon in a haze, my mind replaying Jake's stunned, pleading face over and over. The small, scared boy I had once protected. The teenager I had covered for the brother I had trusted. Without question, he was gone, replaced by a man willing to sacrifice my future to save his own. I pulled into my apartment complex, the old, cracked asphalt crunching under my tires, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, my fingers tight on the steering wheel. The autumn wind rustled through the bare branches above, the sharp, cool air seeping in through the cracked window, cutting through the fog of my thoughts. "Enough," I whispered to myself, the word hanging in the stillness. "Enough." I climbed the stairs to my apartment, the weight of the past few weeks settling like lead in my bones. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the couch, my head falling back against the worn, familiar cushions. I reached for my laptop, the screen flickering to life with the last email I had opened, a message from my lawyer confirming that my identity theft case had been formally filed. I scrolled through the text, the legal jargon blurring together, my mind too numb to absorb it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with Jake's name. I stared at it for a long moment, the bright, unassuming letters taunting me. He had called me 3 times on the drive home, left 2 voicemails, and sent a flurry of increasingly desperate texts. I had ignored them all. But this time I felt a strange, cold curiosity rise in me, a need to hear his voice to feel the full weight of his panic. I swiped to answer, my heart steady, my anger tempered into something colder, sharper. "Callie," he blurted, his voice cracking with fear. "Please, you can't do this. You can't ruin my life over this. We're family." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Family," I echoed, leaning back against the couch, my fingers tightening around the phone. "You threw that word around a lot today, Jake, but I don't think you really understand what it means." He was silent for a moment, the line crackling with his ragged breathing. "I know I screwed up," he said, finally, his voice breaking. "I know I messed up, okay? But I can fix this. I just need a little time." I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest flaring into something close to pity. How many times had I heard this before? How many second chances had I handed him only to watch him squander them without a second thought? "This isn't something you can just fix," I replied, my voice steady but cold. "You forged my name, Jake. You committed a crime. You buried me in $500,000 of debt without even asking, without even considering what that would do to my life. This isn't a mistake, it's a betrayal." He let out a choked sound, a mix of a sob and a bitter laugh. "I was desperate," he whispered. I thought I could make it work. I thought once the property sold, everything would be fine. I didn't think it would get this bad." "You didn't think—" I cut in, my anger flaring again, my fingers digging into the soft fabric of the couch. "That's the problem, Jake. You never think, you just take, and when it all falls apart, you expect me to pick up the pieces." He was silent, his breath hitching on the other end of the line, the weight of my words settling over him like a physical blow. "I can't help you this time," I said finally, my voice soft but unyielding. "I won't. You made this mess, and now you get to deal with the consequences." "Callie, please," he whispered, his voice so small, so broken that for a moment I almost felt the old protective instinct flare up, the urge to shield him, to save him from himself. But then I remembered the bank statements, the forged documents, the months of lies and betrayal, and that flicker of sympathy snuffed out. "I hope you figure it out," I said, my tone flat, final. "But I'm done being your safety net." I ended the call before he could respond, the silence in my apartment settling around me like a shroud. For a long moment, I just sat there. The phone still warm in my hand, my heart thudding in my chest. I felt hollow, drained like a candle burned down to the wick. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the anger and the betrayal, there was something else. Relief. I had drawn my line in the sand, I had chosen myself for the first time in years, and the weight of that choice felt like a breath of fresh, clean air in my lungs. I pushed myself off the couch, my legs unsteady, and walked to the window. Outside, the wind had picked up the leaves swirling in frantic circles across the parking lot, their bright, fiery colors a stark contrast to the gray sky. I watched them for a long time, my breath fogging the glass, my mind quiet. For the first time in weeks, I had lost something today, a brother, a sense of family, a piece of my past. I would never get back, but I had gained something too. Freedom. And as I stood there, the cold autumn wind rattling the glass, I felt a slow, fierce smile spread across my face. Jake had underestimated me. He had thought I would fold, that I would forgive, that I would keep cleaning up his messes. But he was wrong. I was done being the backup plan, the safety net, the quiet, dependable sister who always said yes. From now on, I would be my own priority. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough story too. Jason is my name. I've always been the quiet one in the family, and I'm 28. The one who made no fuss, made no noise, and didn't ask for much. I was assigned that position, and I adhered to it for years. Due in part to habit. In part because I believed that they would eventually notice me if I simply kept my head down long enough. See me, really? Not as the one in charge or the one in need of nothing, but as a brother, a son, and a person who was equally important to the others. However, that never took place, and something inside of me finally broke this year on my birthday. It began just like any other family get-together. We do something little on Sunday. My mom casually texted me earlier in the week. She didn't inquire about my desires. No enthusiasm, no reservations for dinner, no plans, just a, oh yeah, we'll do something. I had some optimism, but I knew better than to have high expectations. For my younger brother Ryan's 25th birthday 3 weeks prior, they planned a lavish celebration, leased a party bus, played loud music throughout the neighborhood, and even surprised him with a weekend getaway to the mountain sections. Like the best brother ever, everyone shared pictures of themselves on Instagram, tagging him with heartfelt messages that said, I can't imagine my life without this guy. I kept the camera steady when I was requested to film movies, smiled graciously in the group photos, and remained silent. When nobody thanked me for paying the upfront catering deposit, I always played that part. The man in the backdrop. Sunday then arrives. Around midday, I arrived to the residence dressed in jeans and a polo shirt. I had at least taken the time to shave and bring over some freshly baked goods from the bakery next to my place, even if it was nothing spectacular. Distracted and talking on the phone, my sister Emma answered the door and walked back inside, after hardly stopping to say hello. There was silence in the living room. No decorations, no balloons, not even a banner saying happy birthday. It's just my mom in the kitchen taking one cupcake out of the refrigerator and putting it on a paper plate. There it is, she remarked, smiling wearily, as if she were giving me a unique pleasure. Do you still enjoy vanilla? I gazed intently at the cupcake. Someone had poked a crooked candle into it, and the icing was already slipping off the top. My dad entered from the garage with a card, the sort you snatched up at the last minute from a pharmacy. Each of us has already signed it in a distinct handwriting. No message, no note, a printed joke about aging with only a few names written underneath. I remained silent for a while. I didn't believe in myself. I simply stood there and blinked in return. What was this constricted sensation in my throat? It wasn't quite fury, it was terrible. As if I had tried to accept being ignored for years and I was no longer able to even pretend. My father gave me a shoulder clap. Feel free to wish. Don't anticipate a parade, by the way. You are no longer a child. It was that I glanced up at him and then at my mother, who seemed to have missed him entirely, as she was absorbed in browsing through her phone. There was no sign of my brother, most likely still recuperating after the weekend of his birthday. Emma had vanished up the stairs. I stared down at a cupcake when I was alone myself in the kitchen. Nobody even bothered to adequately illuminate. Without saying anything, I extinguished the candle. I grabbed my suitcase and left through the front door. I was not stopped. Nobody even inquired about my destination. Before I could even move, I got into my car, drove back to my apartment, and stayed in the parking lot for a good 15 minutes. It was more than just the cupcake. This year wasn't the only one. Almost every year. Each time I paid a bill without raising any issues offered to assist with the relocation, I looked after nieces and nephews. On holidays, I drove 2 hours without requesting anything. Each time I made myself easier, quieter, and smaller. I believed my family required me to be that way. I eventually checked my phone later that evening after checking into a motel a few cities away. Emma sent one SMS. It said, "Mom is in tears. You're where I spent a lot of time looking at the message." I was wondering what I was meant to feel as I hovered my thumb over the keyboard. Shame. I'm sorry. An urgent desire to return quickly and make things right. Instead, I closed my eyes, switched off my phone, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed the stillness to descend without feeling guilty about it. I got up early in the morning. I didn't have to. I had fallen asleep with that tight sensation in my chest because my body was still wired from the previous night, even though there were no job calls or family texts blowing up my phone just yet. The type of thing that never truly goes away. With time, it just becomes dull. There was silence in the motel room. Sterile bedding and generic beige walls. The air conditioner's hum, sterile. It's somehow cozy, but impersonal. No pictures of the family. There were no passive-aggressive remarks coming from a different room. Nothing but quiet. I looked at my phone. Mom's calls were missed, a few from Emma and one from Dad. Ryan did not respond. I wasn't surprised. Of course, it's likely that he was unaware of my departure. None of them were answered by me. Not quite yet. I required room. It's time to reflect. I wanted to sit with my feelings for once without having to justify them to someone who had already determined that I was overreacting or too sensitive. I went to the hotel cafe at around midday and placed an order for a nice breakfast. I brought my laptop along with toast eggs and coffee that wasn't from a reheated pot. I began looking through my bank and email accounts. Not only was I squandering time, I had a plan. You see, nobody in my family really discussed this. I had quietly established myself as that household's main provider. They were irresponsible not because they were poor. I quietly bailed out my parents more times than I can remember after they made a string of poor investments in their late 50s. I assisted Emma in making up the difference in her tuition. When she returned to school, I gave Ryan a few $1,000s to help him start over after he moved out and was unable to pay his rent. At my parents' house, my name appeared on the utilities. I covered half of the mortgage and the monthly internet, but nobody brought up the fact that Dad continued to drive the family car for the majority of the maintenance and during family dinners. At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do, so I did it. However, what transpired the previous day caused me to come to a realization. They expected it, not just relied on me. They considered me a wallet, not a person trustworthy and not giving. The worst part is that they didn't even pretend to respect me. I made a list after breakfast. I retrieved every account in which I was identified as the financial backer, co-owner, or payer. Then slowly, methodically, and calmly, I began sending emails and making calls. The auto insurance was canceled. In any case, I had a different policy for my own car. My account was disconnected by the home utilities. I set it to terminate at the conclusion of the billing cycle. Clean breaks, no drama. My mother and I had the same bank account. The one where I had been contributing a helping hand every month was shut down. I informed her via courteous email that I was no longer able to contribute and moved the remaining money back to my personal savings. The family subscriptions that automatically charge my card each month without anyone saying thank you include Netflix, Hulu, and all others. Lost one click log out of all devices. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. Not free yet, but lighter. Like I was finally shifting the weight I'd been carrying alone for years. I stayed at the hotel for 2 more days. In that time, Emma sent 3 more texts. One said, seriously, where are you? Mom's freaking out. Another just said this is childish. And then finally, you heard them right. That one made me pause. Not because it was true, but because it was exactly the problem I heard them. They couldn't even imagine I'd been hurt first. On the 3rd morning, I finally responded. Just one message. Ask Mom what she did for my birthday. 5 minutes later, Emma replied, Jason, it's not a competition. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove back to my apartment. I wasn't hiding, I just didn't feel like being the one to show up first. Tail between my legs like I was supposed to apologize for finally drawing a boundary. That weekend, I didn't hear from anyone, but on Monday morning, I got a call from my dad. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short-clipped. Jason, we need to talk. I think you're taking this too far. Your mother's really upset. We are related. Call me back. Family, that term used to signify something to me. Now it just sounded like a card they pulled out when things didn't go their way. I didn't call back later that day. I got a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I glanced among the people I spotted, Ryan, rucksack draped over one shoulder, looking like he hadn't slept in a day. Open up, man, he said. We need to discuss. That was the moment things started changing slowly, uneasily. But sure, I didn't open the door immediately away. I simply stood there peering through the crowds at Ryan like I was looking at a stranger. My younger brother, the golden lad, favorite kid, the person who received the applause the weekends away, the unexpected gatherings that were really proud of you. Speeches I didn't hear as a child. Once we were close, or I believed that we were, until I understood that I was assisting him in most of our interactions. Filling in for him. taking over so he could continue coasting. He had never previously arrived at my home in this manner. Unannounced, uninvited, and most definitely not when the situation at home became awkward. "Jason," he repeated softer this time. "Hurry up." With a sigh, I leaned against the door frame and opened it slightly. "What are you looking for?" He smiled somewhat sheepishly, as if we were still children, and he had just used a baseball to smash a window. "Take a look." I had no idea it was so nasty. I arched an eyebrow, unsure of what was wrong, that I was paying your rent 3 months ago while everyone else was busy giving you a party bus extravaganza, or that no one could even think to prepare anything more than a cupcake from the grocery store for my birthday. He stood up and shuffled, attempting to look calm. "That was messed up, all right." However, you remained silent. It was so predictable that I nearly laughed, not because it was humorous. Naturally, I didn't. "You know why?" I asked since I grew up in that home, taught that I was being theatrical if I sought attention, I was being self-centered. If I made any requests, and I was instructed to quit making it about me if I ever complained, "Hey, I feel left out." There was no comeback for him, just scratched the back of his neck and glanced down at his sneakers. "That seems about right. I mean," I said, "and you still let it happen." "You have to know, whenever you knew he did not refute it." At last he added, "I didn't think it mattered to you. You seemed to be excellent all the time. As if that stuff didn't matter to you. I wasn't prepared for how hard that hit. I was skilled at acting, at ingesting food, at being the one about whom no one was concerned. However, I was worn out. I'm so over being the reliable one so that the others could afford to collapse." I gestured for him to enter after completely opening the door. I waited as we sat on the couch. Allow the quiet to linger. I hoped he would sense it. He had never before recognized the weight I bore in each of those silences. "What comes next?" Picking at the loose string on his sleeve, he eventually inquired. "Are you ignoring everyone?" I gave a shrug. "Not with malice. I'm tired of being exploited, though." He laughed bitterly. "Will they even notice?" "Do you think?" I answered. "I know they will." "Mom is sobbing already. Do you recall?" He flinched. "She's a complete disaster." Continue claiming that she didn't intend for things to be unjust. It's funny that she just said it now. Ryan glanced up at me and then peered closely. Like a man who recently learned someone he had taken for granted had boundaries he didn't know not to breach, rather than a younger brother to an older one. "You want me to do what?" he inquired. "As if I couldn't repair everything. Tell me what you need." However, it was one of his rare moments of humility. Although I understood this wasn't only about me, I still mostly believed it. It concerned the whole house of cards that my parents had constructed with me as the cornerstone. And it was all beginning to tremble now that I had begun to draw out. I told them to be honest, informed them that I left because I was fed up with being treated as though I didn't exist. Inform them that I will no longer be providing financial assistance. Not anymore. Only until the month's end. No more paying for Mom's prescription drugs or Dad's truck repairs or Emma's lack of tuition. Slowly he nodded. "That's finally starting to weigh on me," I added. "Don't tell them I'm angry if they ask why. Inform them that I'm finished." He simply nodded quietly, as if he had finally understood or was at least making an effort, and walked away without saying anything more. I didn't think he would change so quickly. I knew in my heart that something had changed, even though I didn't expect any of them to. My mother left me a voicemail later that evening. She didn't shout. "Did I not feel guilty?" she said quietly. "Weary. I didn't intend for it to be that inconsistent." "Jason," I pondered. "I suppose I assumed you didn't require the same items, and perhaps it was a bad guess. I apologize. Please give us a call or stop by." Simply something I didn't answer, not quite yet because there was no apology in what followed. It was pressure, guilt, and denial. The actual manipulation then started. 2 days went by. No more phone calls, no more text messages, nothing but quiet. Then everything fell into place like clockwork. Emma's message was the first. It was a lengthy theatrical email rather than a text. It said in the subject line, "This family is being torn apart by you. I knew what was inside without even opening it. However, my curiosity overcame me. I selected the first line. I'm not sure what's bothering you, Jason, but families don't operate like this." She continued by listing all the things I had done, including leaving Mom, creating a scene, walking out, and refusing to help. "As though you were punishing us, I was behaving like a stranger." She remarked that it was my duty to help keep the family together since our parents were in pain. "It's my duty, not hers, not Ryan's, only my." No one brought up the cupcake, the years of unfair treatment, or the fact that I had paid for half of their lives. "It's just a guilty plea disguised as care." She ended with the kicker. "I'm not sure if we can ever resolve this if you don't visit this weekend." As I sat there looking at my laptop, I was astounded by how predictable it was that we might come and go. Not by the words, "I didn't go." On Sunday evening, my father texted me, only 2 words, "Give me a call." I didn't. He then arrived at my residence. When I didn't answer, he pounded twice more and then more forcefully. His voice came to me through the door, firm and low yet tinged with annoyance. "Jason, this is enough. Go ahead and open the door." I remained still. He knocked once more. "You're in there." "I know that," I said nothing. Then I clenched my fists at whatever he uttered. "Your mother is becoming sick because of you. She's eating like clockwork, emotional extortion." I stood there after cautiously opening the door. We looked at one another for a while. He had practiced this encounter as evidenced by his stern look. His eyes showed it to me. He wasn't paying attention. His goal was to triumph. "Have you finished pouting?" "Oh," he said. I felt something when I heard the word sulking. "Do you believe this to be that?" Quietly, I asked. "I believe," he replied, entering without permission that this small prank has enough gained traction. "Your mom has been in tears. Emma is enraged. Ryan, too. He's making an effort, but things are getting out of control." I tried to remain composed as I stood still. "You're discussing a stunt. However, you have never inquired as to why I left." Dad laughed, "So we didn't have a lavish celebration." "Hurry up, Jason. You're 30 years old. Confetti and balloons are not necessary." "No," I explained. "I needed to feel important. I needed to be reminded that I am more than simply a backup plan and a bank account, that I'm more than simply the person who keeps things going while everyone else gets to take center stage after all these years." He gave an eye roll. "You've been theatrical all your life," that term once more. "Is it dramatic?" I gave one brief, bitter laugh. "What do you know? You are free to leave." "What I heard you. I said, you came here to tell me that I'm the issue. You came not to offer an apology. You failed to comprehend. Things are collapsing. So you came. Now that I no longer have to pay for anything." His eyes narrowed. "Do you believe this has to do with money?" "I'm certain it is." I mentioned that since the entire home began to tremble. As soon as the bank switched off, Dad remained silent, simply stood there in a rage. Subsequently, in a voice I hadn't heard since childhood. "Oh," he said, "I gave him a direct look, and you now believe that you are superior to us." "No. At last I believe I should be treated equally." Without saying another thing, he departed. The family group chat, which I hadn't left muted, came alive the following day. Emma expressed her disappointment with my handling of the situation. Mom just sent one message. "I'm not sure who you've turned into." Then Ryan responded. I dropped. He was the lone grown-up in the room. Took too long for me to notice. The conversation stopped. The next several days were calm. That was when the true turning point occurred, but I felt it may finally be finished. A certified letter from a lawyer arrived in the mail. My parents have given me notice that they want to take me out of the future estate plan because of recent conduct and alienation. A chill went through me as I sat at my kitchen table with the paper in my hand. They honestly believed it was leverage, not because I was interested in the inheritance. They were unaware that I was already aware. 2 years prior, when I contributed to the lawyer's fees, I had viewed the estate paperwork. The primary beneficiary was never me, Ryan was. Now they were only utilizing it, destroying the appearance of what I had previously been left out of, as if I ought to be thankful for a scrap in the future. That was the last straw. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I just got up, went to my desk, and took out a folder that said receipts, both literally and figuratively. I had all of the emails, bank transfers, and invoices I had paid for them for the previous 5 years. They weren't gathered by me to exact retribution. I collected them because I had gradually and painfully discovered that if you allow it, people will change the course of history. And I wasn't going to let anyone change mine now. I went through the files all night long. After paying yet another family expense, I received every transfer receipt and kind text message saying thank you. I sent bills, took screenshots of bank accounts, and retrieved old texts that stated things like, "Hey, can you cover this month?" Only till we've resolved the issue, I create a chronology that is well-structured, comprehensive, and unarguable. I wrote a letter after that. Just the facts, nothing sentimental or angry. I added totals. I took note of the precise dates I mentioned the emergency transfers when my mom's credit card bounced or my dad's truck broke down the utility accounts that were still in my name and the auto insurance premiums. I used a single sentence to complete it. Please take this official notice that as of this date, all direct and indirect financial support has been permanently ceased. I then forwarded it to Emma Ryan, their parents, and all of them with everything attached. Red receipts indicate individual emails. With a brief note, I also copied the attorney who issued me the estate letter. Thank you for the heads up. Please don't threaten to exclude me because I was never the intended recipient. Scraps don't interest me. The empire has been subsidized by me. My phone rang less than an hour later. Emma was the one I let the voicemail go. Mom and Dad followed by a barrage of messages on the family group chat. The majority of them. There is no need for some form of this. You're exaggerating the situation, and my own fave, families don't handle things like this, do they? Because it seems like families only find solutions to issues when they don't have to face their own actions. Ryan then sent me a private text. I finished reading it. I had no idea it was so much. I answered plainly. You do now. Later that evening, I saw he departed the group chat, but he didn't respond. My aunt's mother's sister called me the next weekend. She lived out of state, and we only visited one other on vacations. So I hadn't spoken to her in years. However, she had observed the repercussions. After hearing the family's version of events, I read my email, which my mother had sent with a dramatic caption to the extended family. Observe what Jason has become. I wanted you to tell me, said my aunt on the phone. So I told her everything. Slowly, calmly, I wasn't overly dramatic, made no attempt to twist it, just presented it as a narrative. At last, I thought it was worthwhile to share. She exhaled deeply once I finished. She added, I always wondered why they leaned on you so much, but I assumed it was reciprocal. I was unaware that they never returned anything to you. I had never heard anyone in the family utter it before. She did not provide an answer, didn't attempt to correct it. I just verified it. For me, that was more significant than any phony birthday party. Things altered in the weeks that followed. However, not in the manner that sitcoms promise. A large family reunion was not held. No sincere regrets in the rain, no group embrace in the parking lot, and dramatic music was playing. Rather, the quiet became heavier, longer, and in some ways more serene. Mom made many additional attempts to get in touch. She even wrote a letter and mailed it. Pages, lengthy, handwritten. It wandered, half guilt trip, half apology. She claimed that she had no idea how much I did it. She believed that I didn't mind because she was flawed but always meant well. I think that I did too. However, I also think that years of selective blindness cannot be justified by well-meaning intentions. I replied in writing, You are not hated by me. I have no intention of hurting anyone. However, I will no longer pretend I am not indestructible, and it wasn't necessary for me to be. Space is okay with me. If people need to see me clearly, that's what it is. She didn't answer. I once saw Emma at the wedding of a mutual acquaintance some months later. You look excellent, she murmured as she strode forward, shielded by a drink. You as well, I answered. For a while, we stood silent. Ryan has been different, she added, more realistic. I believe he was finally shaken by the figures. I gave a nod. She went on. I didn't intend for things to get so cold. I answered, I know. But I believe the cold made me more realistic. She didn't dispute. Simply smiled me sadly before fading back into the throng. Dad eventually contacted out once more, this time offering a new beginning rather than an apology. He proposed that we forget about the past and visit for Thanksgiving. I said, no, I'm creating a new project. I said, we might be able to meet in the center one day. Not yet, though, because this is the problem. He wasn't trying to make amends on their terms, he was giving a fresh start. The sort where everything returns to normal and nobody discusses what occurred. Normal wasn't what I wanted, though I desired honesty. Additionally, I discovered that those who are unwilling to discuss their hurt are not prepared to regain trust in a timely manner. I occupied the void they created. Weekends spent with people who didn't treat me like a utility. Increased. I got back in touch with former college friends. I even joined a hiking club, something I had never done before since I was constantly too busy being needed. With 3 pals and no expectations. I spent my next birthday in a peaceful cabin. No drama, no flamboyant celebration. It was just a peaceful weekend filled with laughter and individuals who came because they wanted to, not because I reminded them. For the first time, I felt genuinely honored, not for what I was capable of, just for being me, not for what I offered. Therefore, no, there are no spectacular fireworks or explosive retaliation at the end of this tale. It concludes with a silent recovery of space-time and value. Bridges weren't burned by me. I simply quit fixing ones that only ever took me to unwelcome areas, and my anger has subsided. I am at liberty, and that's more valuable than all the party buses combined. Each banner. From all of us, I kept acting like the card was sufficient, even though I never asked for it. I no longer accept scraps from a table I made myself. I only invite those who have something genuine to offer, and I establish my own story. 3. My brother was given the firm by my parents after they retired, claiming that women aren't suited for leadership roles. I backed off, grinning. I took someone out to supper 3 months later. My brother's wine glass fell. My mother broke down in tears. It was the type of meal when everything appeared to be flawless. The table appeared to be arranged for Mom's special occasion at first sight. China. Under the chandelier, the wine cups gleamed. It appeared as though a mold had been used to form the mashed potatoes my father had shaved. I arrived with a visitor, and my brother wore a blazer. You'd think I'd brought a unicorn home, guy. My mother's eyes glowed as if she had just experienced divine intervention as soon as we entered. She air-kissed both my cheeks and pretended that she hadn't spent the previous 10 years telling me that I was married to my job. Well, look at you, she remarked. My father nodded briefly. Brought someone around at last? How I grinned, unspoken. Yet the presumptions come in like mist. Later, Emily, the cousin who usually wore pearls and questioned why I didn't soften my appearance, whispered, "Is he your boyfriend?" across the table. He is really well groomed. I grinned once more. That kind of thing. They all sipped their wine, laughed, and made a mental note of the wedding date. My brother and I never agreed. Halfway through dinner, Thomas lifted his glass and delivered the same statement he usually made when he thought the spotlight wasn't shining brightly enough. Something about preserving the family name, history, and sacrifice. It was his time to take the helm of the business which had been in our family for 3 generations. He expressed gratitude for our parents' faith in him, expressed gratitude to the visitors for their faith in him, praised God for providing him with the courage to face this challenge. He didn't even glance at me or thank me. Beside me, I poured myself more wine. My visitors were quite silent, kind, and perceptive, the lone person not acting at the table. They had no intention of making this supper the most memorable of their lives. I learned 3 months ago that they had given Thomas ownership of the business, the voting stock, the title, and the authority. They handed my father everything after we worked side by side for 15 years, handling operations, logistics, and clearing up Thomas's mess. They also gave me a faint grin. Here you'll always be welcome, something like an extra chair or a couch cushion. They put me down like they were breaking in the living room. A faithful pet receives sad news. It's not that you lack the ability. I'm afraid I'm going to faint, my mother replied, grabbing for my hand. Women simply aren't made to handle this type of strain. We didn't want to cause you any trouble, your sibling. Has that leadership instinct? My father continued. He makes decisions. In other words, he makes educated predictions and hopes for the best. I inquired as to their sincerity, like he was signing a peace pact. My dad nodded. You'll be a great support system behind every great man, my mother stated. She drifted off as if it were meant to be consoling. I grinned. I went home after that and got to work organizing things. My mother looked at me knowingly as she leaned in to eat supper again. She nodded at my guest and said, He's very handsome. Does he work in finance? You know now that your brother is in charge, it's probably time to start considering your own next course of action. You could still be able to have children. I blinked a household. She smiled. I take it you've always desired children. I hadn't specifically, but it seems that my desires weren't important. In picture ops, Thomas was laughing as usual with two of the board members who had come for the complimentary steak. One of them inquired about the experience of being the man of the hour. He smiled. Since I was a young child, I had been getting ready for this. I always had the instincts for it, according to Dad. Instincts correct. Such is the tendency to hold me accountable for failing to meet quarterly targets. I took a slow sip of my wine after playing golf all quarter long and referring to it as networking. They were all grinning, content with their illusions and congratulating themselves on their wise decision, as though he had personally carved Thomas out of oak and ambition. Dad leaned back in his chair and watched him with pride. They would assume, but they didn't know what I had brought or who I had brought. The air was heavy with self-satisfaction by the time dessert arrived. The company logo was piped in gold icing on the 3-tiered monstrosity cake. When they pulled it out, my mother actually gave a clap. She raised her glass and said, Thomas, you've truly made us proud. I cocked my head. Indeed, this room is filled with pride. Thomas smiled at me as if I was finally catching up. I am aware that it is not what you anticipated. The slightest smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he spoke. However, you will adore what we have in store for you. For someone with people skills, marketing is ideal. I looked him in the eye. Correct. Because color schemes and slogans are the best ways to express vision. He thought I was kidding, and he laughed. He was laughed at by all except the man seated beside me. I looked at the faces I had known my entire life around the table. My parents are smug and content. My brother is soaking up compliments like gravy and a sponge. Uncles and aunts raising a glass to the next generation. And as expected, I, the obedient daughter, grinned politely. If only they were aware that they knew the true identity of the man standing next to me. If they were aware of what I had verified and discovered in those documents individually. For 3 long months, I'd imagined this night 100 different ways. The silence, the gasps, the outrage, the shattered version of the perfect family portrait they'd spent years trying to frame. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out, and when they did, nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. When I was 6, I told my parents I wanted to take karate. My dad blinked at me like I just told him I wanted to join the Navy. He glanced at my mom, then laughed. You mean ballet, sweetheart. I didn't, but I ended up in ballet anyway. Pink tutu slippers, the whole thing. I cried after every class. They said I was being difficult, dramatic. Eventually, I stopped crying and just went quiet. When I was 8, my brother got a remote-controlled car. I got a tea set. When I was 10, he acquired a tool set. I received a baking kit. When I was 12, I told my dad I wanted to operate a firm like him one day. He looked up from his newspaper and remarked, "That's wonderful, but you'll have your hands full with kids by then." My mom smiled like it was a praise. "You'll make a great wife." I recall nodding, smiling back. Then I went to my room, locked the door, and cried till I fell asleep. That was the year I wished I was a guy. Charlie desired it, like, close my eyes and make it happen. Kind of wish I thought maybe then they'd see me. Listen to me, be proud of me. I was the courteous one instead. The assistant. The person who cleared away the mess. The one that didn't occupy a lot of room. My sibling, he was a born leader. This meant that he was constantly correct, noisy, and dirty in our home. But he wasn't. I stopped requesting things by the time I was a teenager. No more karate, no more business books. Just ballet baking and timely smiles. When Thomas once shown a like for space, they purchased a telescope for him. After I won a maths competition, I received a journal. A journal. You see, they don't have futures. They have sentiments. I kept thinking that people may notice me if I put forth more effort. So I went to work. I did some studying. I had excellent marks. When things broke, they were silently fixed. My dad was worried out at 14, so I stayed up late organizing his home office. He was hardly aware Thomas spilled coffee on a spreadsheet, but he was commended for trying. At 15, I took first place in a regional debating tournament. My mother asked whether I would think about becoming a teacher. She stated, "It's such a nurturing job." After arguing with a server about a salad, Thomas was referred to as aggressive. Even so, I persuaded myself perhaps I was insufficient. Perhaps if I grinned more, if I didn't correct them, perhaps. Perhaps they would eventually remark, "You're good at this," if I performed my duty more effectively. They didn't. Around my senior year of high school, things began to change. Kayla was a buddy of mine. Astute, it's funny, audacious. Her father had a modest company. Her mother worked as an engineer. Kayla participated in football, practiced martial arts, or whatever else she desired. When she expressed her desire to manage her own business, her parents applauded. One day purchased her Christmas business cards. I observed that the first time I visited her home saw the potential differences. It was almost too good to be true. I recall having this weird, heavy sensation in my chest as I walked home that evening. Not melancholy, not rage, just a realization. I wasn't being held back by my gender. Who are my parents? I was hearing their voices in my brain now, the ones who encourage me to be quiet, to shrink, to make things easy for other people. I thus stopped listening, piece by piece. Not everything at once, I first joined the school's business club in secret. Then, while my parents believed I was preparing for my impending wedding, I proudly began saving money, looking into programs and reading case studies at night. They were still blind to it, or perhaps they didn't want to. As valedictorian, I delivered a speech during graduation. Later, my dad told me that was very beautiful. You have to compose a piece for your brother's next gathering. I enrolled in every leadership program I could find while in college, majoring in business. I learned how things actually worked, networked, and interned. When I returned home for breaks, I nodded and smiled, letting them believe that I was only assisting with office tasks. They never inquired about my true activities. I was never asked what I wanted. My brother informed everyone that I was interested in administrative tasks such as spreadsheets. I remained silent because deep down, I still believed that they may change their minds if I continued to show them. At last, they may remark, "I'm ready." Perhaps they will see me at last. Then came the day that a family meeting was called. The living room was where we were all sitting. There are cookies on the table, chilling champagne. The atmosphere felt rather stiff. They informed us of their retirement at that point, that Hamas was prepared to inherit the business. Only him, nor shared leadership, nor a collaboration. Not even a polite reference to me. "Give him a kiss, as if it were the most obvious decision ever," my father stated it. "He fits right in." My mother gave a nod. "Helping has always come naturally to you. You will continue to be involved, my love." They assured me that I would always have a place and gave me a bonus check, somewhere in the break room like a stool. This time I didn't protest or weep. I said, "Thank you," with a smile. Something subtle and profound changed within me as I left that chamber. Like if I hadn't simply been wiped once more, I no longer felt invisible. I was satisfied. I discovered something odd. A few days later, when going over some handover files, a folder that was out of place, a document that was not consistent, I initially believed it to be just another error made by Thomas. However, it became worse. The more I looked, I saw things that I shouldn't have seen and that nobody had warned me about. Things that might alter everything if they were true. I refrained from screaming. I didn't barge into someone's workplace. I snapped a photo. I then called a few people, give them the impression that I left, let them think I agreed to it because they would soon realize something they had not anticipated. They shoved the girl away. She had had enough of waiting to be chosen. My brother was in the middle of another anecdote about how he ruined a client agreement and then saved the brand's reputation. When Mark's briefcase opened, he produced a thin folder. No drama. Quietly, as if it were a menu, simply slide it onto the table. I choose not to look at it. I didn't have to. In the radiance of their idyllic evening, my parents continued to sip wine. They referred to it as the celebration of legacy. It seems that leaving the family firm to the least responsible individual in the room was part of the legacy. I raised my glass to Thomas and to strong leadership, my mother replied. I grinned as I touched my glass on hers. Strong is a good way to describe it. As though clearing his throat before dessert, Mark spoke gently. I have something to share. Everyone pivoted. Thomas narrowed his eyes. Hold on. Again, who are you? Mark extended his hand. The whole table fell silent as forensic accountant Mark Delaney spoke. My father blinked. What are you? Mark remained courteous. I was employed to look into the company's financial issues internally. The table became motionless. Thomas laughed aloud. Close compelled. Isn't this a joke? At last I said something. Not at all. Unless you include your bookkeeping, there is no punchline. After opening the folder, Mark gave 2 copies to my mom and dad. The third was grabbed by Thomas. He initially skimmed the pages as if they were unfinished homework, then he froze. My mom leaned forward to read over his shoulder. She stopped smiling. My dad glanced at the figures. His expression didn't alter at first, but his knuckles became white where they held the tablecloth. Mark's voice was calm. These reports include proof of illicit withdrawals, forged vendor bills, and transfers into personal accounts. Some of those monies came straight from the firm. Others, he glanced at my parents, originated in your retirement account. My mom let out a gasp. Thomas got to his feet. There was nothing that I stole. My father's tone was piercing. Take a seat. A child who had just been taken to the principal's office was liked by Thomas. You claimed to have given up gambling, my mother said. Her voice broke. Yes, I did. I mean, I had everything under control for the most part. You stole our retirement funds. With a quiet voice, my father asked. That wasn't the case. I intended to repair it. How I inquired. Using monopoly money or magic. Red-faced. Thomas turned to face me. You were not entitled. This person was taken to supper by you. This could not have been addressed in secret. I said I could have. However, I wanted everyone to witness the consequences of giving someone authority simply because they were born with the proper plumbing. My father got up. We were ambushed by you. Oh, I apologize, I said. As I have been doing for the past 20 years, was I meant to wait for you to call on me? The yelling began. I had embarrassed the family, according to my mother. According to my dad, I purposefully blindsided them. Thomas attempted to pretend that the victim had claimed that I had deceived them. Claimed that my main concern was retaliation. I was interested in the business. I mentioned the legacy, the clientele, and the staff. You have a serious obsession. You need to have approached us first, my mother said. And what? I inquired, received a piece of cake and a pat on the head. I wouldn't have been believed by you. You never do. It was not denied by them. It stung more than I thought it would. Dessert was served, but nobody touched anything. Professionally, Mark excused himself, not a drama. Simply left me there in the debris after leaving via the front door. My father looked around the table. The party is ended, everyone is out. The dining room was deserted in 5 minutes. I see the bright side. Smudged glasses, cake unaltered. There was no longer any family celebration. Thomas barged out of the rear. Don't apologize. No justification. With her face in her hands, my mother sat at the table as if it had answers. My dad gazed to the ceiling. I sat calmly while I watched them come to terms with what I had always known: they would wager on the incorrect child. Nobody spoke the morning after the meal, nor a message, nor a call. My door was not knocked on. Nothing but quiet. After everything, you'd think someone would get in touch, to shout perhaps, to weep perhaps to express gratitude for preventing the company's demise. However, no. Nothing. My mother left me a voicemail 3 days later. She spoke in a soothing tone, the quiet that signals an impending explosion. The legal team has been consulted. I've made the decision to file charges with your father. She made no specific reference to Thomas. We're taking the necessary action. With my heart pounding, I listened while holding my phone in my lap and experiencing an odd sensation. I hope. For once, it seemed like they were seeing my brother clearly, which is why I didn't want to see him in jail. The allegations were short-lived. Specifically, 2 weeks. Then there was another voicemail. It was quieter this time. Sadder, we've decided against it. He remains our son. He has consented to treatment. He will receive assistance. No recognition, no apologies. Another subdued reminder that there will always be another opportunity for him. I wasn't asked what I thought. They didn't seek assistance. They did, however, request a copy of the whole report from Mark. I had already read it from beginning to end. They were curious about the true severity of the situation. The solution. It's bad enough. Nearly $500,000 had been spent by Thomas, some from corporate accounts, and the remainder from the retirement fund he was meant to assist in overseeing. He had been entrusted with my parents' future. He used it to wager on sports and play poker online. However, I continued to be the issue in some way. A few days later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store, but she didn't greet me. She only glanced at me before turning her head away. I waited for a minute in the hopes that she would say anything. He didn't, so I continued to walk. Thomas attended counseling. That's what they said anyhow. He found employment elsewhere. Junior supervisor at a friend's business, allegedly to aid with his reconstruction. He was also mandated to repay all of the money. Every single dime. Not to me, to my parents. They did not wish to damage the company's reputation. They so decided to resolve the matter amicably. Tidy up the mess. Put the headlines aside. Someone on the board told me that he was fortunate, something he could have done real time if I had put more effort into it. I hadn't pushed because I was tired of wasting energy on people who never noticed me, not because I felt sorry for him. Weeks went by. The group continued to stand a little dazed. The next twist then appeared. My dad gave me a call. He didn't greet me, just, "We must discuss the business." I said very little. Simply wait. He finally spoke what I had always hoped to hear. However, it fell flat somehow. "You were correct. We ought to have seen it sooner. For years you were keeping this place together." I didn't express gratitude to him. Rather, I inquired, "Now what?" A pause occurred. He cleared his throat after that. "We're considering inviting someone in, a CEO with experience, an outsider." I blinked. Really? "We simply believe it would be easier since it would be too difficult to give to your daughter." That's not the point, is it? Once more he was silent. That was my response. I typed out my resignation that evening. No drama, no justification. A brief email. 15 years later. I was done. I anticipated greater pain. He didn't. After holding my breath for years, it was actually like letting out a breath. I refrained from crying. I didn't think twice. I simply poured myself a drink of wine and shut down the laptop. I began working at a new job 2 months later, high-level plan. More pay and more hours. No glass ceiling that looms over me like a dangling chandelier. The CEO asked me why I had left the family firm during the interview. I grinned. For family reasons. She chuckled. Everyone has those. Neither of my parents called Thomas, most certainly didn't. However, I didn't need them to. I wasn't trying to get their approval for the first time in my life. I had no intention of waiting to be chosen. I had no intention of proving anything. I was simply going about my life. Lastly, without requesting consent, I sometimes ponder what would have transpired if I had been selected first. If they had had the same faith in me as they had in him, if I had been given the keys rather than the crumbs, then I recall. Their crown is not necessary for me. I constructed my own. He set it on fire after they handed him everything. I got nothing from them. I still got up, though. Not to exact retribution, not to be commended just because I was able to. And it's okay if it makes me the antagonist in their view of events. I'm living mine at last, at least. Get more articles like this by subscribing. And whether you've ever been the one who gets ignored, how did you make it better? Story 4. I gave her $800 a week to support her ideal life. You're just here for the free food, right? She asked with a giggle. On her birthday, cake didn't keep me around. 13 voicemails, 3 messages, and 1 anxious tap on my door. Came 36 hours later. I was not anticipating a thank you. Not only did I not anticipate flowers, but I also did not anticipate that I take it. You're only here for the free food. With her glittering champagne glass catching the light like she was accepting a prize for being the cutest person alive. Ava spoke loudly enough for everyone on the balcony to hear. Around her, laughter erupted. The harsh kind, not the courteous kind. The sort that gives you the chills. I wondered whether everyone else at the table knew that I was the one who had to pay for everything, as I stood there with the $200 present that I had wrapped an hour ago. Ava, my pampered, idealized cousin who aspires to be an influencer, gave me a sarcastic smirk that I was all too familiar with. And she wasn't only giggling at me at the time, I was being erased by her. I waited for someone to intervene, anyone Aunt Karen or her boyfriend, perhaps? However, nobody did. Nobody ever does. Rather, Ava continued to smile as if I hadn't sent her $800 a week for 11 months because she couldn't handle her money after leaving her job to create wellness material. I paid for her rent, electricity, groceries when she lost her pin spa days, the facial she had 2 days prior to the party, and emergency veterinary care for the dog she couldn't afford. This whole celebration was financed by me. The balloon arch, the rooftop DJ, the flower arrangement with her name, and the gold foil all evoked her Great Gatsby theme cupcakes too, until she posted a boomerang she would not allow anybody to eat. I was the joke now. Only the cheap cousin, an off-brand pair of pants, a recyclable envelope, and a little gift card. Not worthy of Instagram, not wealthy, not important. In the backdrop, it's just a strolling ATM. I was holding a frozen cupcake, my ears are still ringing from her chuckle. Then, as if I were recording the last payment in a transaction, I put it down, composed and exact. I never consented, I didn't cause any trouble. No drink was thrown by me, I didn't bid them farewell, I turned to go, I was not stopped. Not even Ava, who once sobbed in 6 consecutive voicemails because she was so stressed up about a $193.47 phone bill that she was unable to breathe. That following night, I made the payment. It has already been a month since then. As if I were sympathetic, she was laughing in my face. I am a fool for not realizing that I have been used. I didn't stay for cake, and the following day, I didn't pick up the phone or the subsequent one. However, by hour 36, I had received 3 messages and 14 voicemails. Shortly before midnight, I heard a faint, tentative knock on my flat door, as if the person on the other end wasn't sure whether I would even answer it. This time I had more to say than ever before and nothing left to offer, so they were right to be terrified. It began with a single short-term payment. 11 months later, I was supporting her way of life as if I owed her money. She always remembered to submit a Venmo request, but she never expressed gratitude. First, there was a phone call. "I know this is unpleasant, but I need help paying my rent this month." Ava's voice trembled just enough to appear sincere. "I promise to reimburse you next week, but only if I can get a few more brand deals." 47 weeks have passed since then. She never reimbursed me, spoiler alert. Not once. Coffee costs not even $5. But I said yes at the time. Why? Because was I simply gullible? Perhaps because we're related. That was my self-talk. In reality, though, it was guilt. It's harmful to feel guilty, particularly after being told your entire life that you're the fortunate one who survived, has a legitimate profession, and ought to provide a hand. More rent was the only expense, at first followed by food and unexpected dental work. Her dog then needed surgery. She had to start again after losing her phone, which prevented her from creating material and causing her to lose fans. She sobbed. Without fail, I made my payment each week, $800, occasionally more. My life wasn't luxurious. To avoid having to explain why I couldn't split the bill, I avoided going out with friends, ate spaghetti 4 times a week, and drove a beat-up Civic. Ava shared videos of yoga studios with $30 drop-ins and beach photos from weekend getaways with face masks that cost more than my electricity bill. I paid for her comfort, her quiet, and her well-maintained appearance. What's the worst? She pretended it wasn't unusual, as if I was only fulfilling my role. When I gave money, she would add, "You're always so generous." "No, thank you. No, I'll reimburse you, that's all." It seemed as though she was complimenting me on being her personal bankroll. However, the really pivotal moment occurred 6 weeks before to the celebration. She contacted me in tears and claimed that her landlord was being irrational and demanding rent again like a monster, and that she might be evicted. "It's only a temporary situation." She gave a whiff. "Please, I'm going to drown." I sent her $2, $400 all at once. She shared a picture from a new spa the following day. "When you realize the universe provides #abundance mindset," was the caption. I read that again and again while I gazed at it for a whole minute. Now I was the universe. I began keeping note of every transaction that evening. Pay the rent, groceries, cosmetic procedures, Uber trips in an emergency. She paid $89 to a bakery for gluten-free dog birthday cupcakes and $80 to her hairstylist. A dog indeed. It came to slightly over $31,000 at the conclusion of the month. I could have paid off my college bills, purchased a new vehicle, or taken a trip, but instead I had given Ava a whole influencer lifestyle. She continues to call me cheap. Since she had previously used that phrase as a jest, it struck a deeper chord than I had anticipated. She rolled her eyes and exclaimed, "Wow, when I brought beer to a family cookout one time instead of wine, boring and reasonably priced, you are classic." Once more, I declined her invitation to join her on a birthday trip to Cabo. "Stop being so tight," she mumbled. I choose to disregard it. She was going through a lot, so I always disregarded it since it wasn't her intention. Because I was the one who always picked up the pieces, the one who was responsible, and the one who was composed. However, following that spa post, something changed. Something broke. She phoned me the next time to report that her Wi-Fi was turned off. I stopped. I remained silent longer than normal. "Are you there?" Her tone was already defensive as she asked, "I'm present." I don't know why she became silent, but I spoke carefully, as you are always helpful. At last she spoke. "You promised to support me no matter what." And there it was. Not appreciation, not modesty, entitlement. My assistance did not seem like compassion to her. It was a right to her, as if I owed her a way of life. At that point, I understood that this was no longer support. This was enslavement. I didn't send the $800 that week. I discovered 3 missed calls when I woke up the next day, then an SMS message. Hello, was there a problem with the transfer? I'm getting another SMS from my landlady. I didn't respond. She made another Venmo request for me the next week. Just the amount $800, no message. I turned it down. Funny how some people disappear the moment you actually need them, she said in a narrative she shared 2 hours later. Genuine ones endure. I burst out laughing. The birthday invitation followed. I didn't want to go to the rooftop event with a Gatsby theme, but I felt compelled go since she had called and said, I really need this to go well. I'd like you to be there. I mean it. I thus arrived with clean clothes and a present. With what little dignity I still possessed, I ironed myself. She also made fun of me in front of everyone for only coming for the free meal. They also chuckled. I had no one to defend myself. Nobody inquired. Wait a minute, isn't that the man who essentially covered the entire cost? Now that the gravy train had stopped and she had nowhere else to go, she was pleading, messaging, and phoning. But because this was about more than simply money, now I wasn't responding. This had to do with how much of myself I had given up in order to get acceptance and how I felt about the transaction when she arrived at my door crying, maybe, just maybe I thought she finally got it. I destroyed the bridge myself when she doubled down instead. It was just before midnight when the knock arrived. The first time I disregarded it. The second followed. This time it's quieter, as if the person who had done it had lost the guts to do it. I recognized her. I waited. Please, then all I have to do is speak. Ava, the same voice who once contacted me in the middle of the night to say she didn't want to pay surge pricing because her Uber got lost. The same voice that pleaded with me for rent assistance. The same voice that, while holding a glass of champagne I had paid for, called me cheap in front of 30 others. She was standing there when I answered the door. Her party dress zipped up over her hoodie, mascara smudged shoes in one hand like a dejected prom queen. Even if her makeup was smeared and her eyes were blurry, she was still Ava, the girl who could make herself appear broken enough to be forgiven. I said something I didn't mean, she muttered. I remained silent. I simply moved out of the way, like a kid awaiting a reprimand. She entered carefully. I was intoxicated, she began. It was a joke. I didn't think, I interrupted her. Never begin with that, she blinked. You didn't respond after you left. Come on, I thought you were crazy. I didn't intend it that way. You know. No, I said, that's precisely how you mean it. I was done waiting for her to come up with the perfect lie. But she opened her mouth again. I'm cheap, you say. In front of others, I said, I don't even know these people. People who laughed at me while stealing my money from gold toothpicks. I didn't ask you to cover all of the costs. Her voice cracked as she snapped. I genuinely laughed. You didn't. I arched an eyebrow. Let me remind you, I unlocked my Venmo, took up my phone, and extended it towards her. Page after page, $1, $200, $800 for $100. Because her card was responding strangely, she even spent $36 on sushi. You didn't inquire. You pleaded. You shed tears. You are guilty, and you made me feel ashamed when I stopped. Suddenly protective, she folded her arms. Why do you think this is so important? Your income is more than sufficient. A few thousand. What is that? That was it. Something snapped in my body. My chest feels so hard I had to inhale before responding. What do you know? Silently, I said. I earn plenty. Yes, I do. And I've been living like a ghost for 11 months in order for you to appear alive, in order for you to publish lobster rolls. I ate ramen after paying your rent. I was unable to afford treatment, so I skipped it to allow you to breathe in your foolish eucalyptus-scented yoga classroom. I choked. Her eyes filled with tears. Once again, I had no idea. You didn't give a damn. Quiet. Then she retreated. Get moving, she whispered quietly. I'm your family. You promised to always assist. Once more, it was there. The deception I offered to assist. I gave a nod. I didn't promise to vanish for you. Then abruptly, she turned to face the floor. What the heck? After everything, you're severing my connection forever. All of it, I said it again. What is everything exactly? Do you mean when you laughed in my face and drained me dry? You know the bit where you acted like I didn't exist unless there was a bill to pay? Her expression stiffened. You're exaggerating. Excellent, I remarked, taking a step forward. Then perhaps I will at last equal your vigor. She was struck by that. She took a step back. Do you believe that you are now superior to me? No, I responded icily. I believe I've finally figured out who you are. Her lips opened, but she didn't say anything, so I continued. You attempted to make me smaller when you were in front of a large group of people. The one person who has supported you from the beginning was humiliated by you. And now you're here feeling guilty and crying, believing that I'll fold once again. She took a deep breath. All I need is a little assistance, just for this month. I know I spoke a single word and Renee is late. Sharp tidy. She appeared as though it had never been mentioned to her before. I approached the door and pulled it open. I don't have to take care of you, Ava. No more. Her lip quivered. I don't have anyone else, though. I was taken by you, I said, and you gave me the best laugh of your life. She paused for a moment, hurt, furious, perhaps both. Then, whispering something to herself, she snatched up her handbag and walked out. I secured the door and shut it behind her. I then switched off my phone, this time for real. There will be no further transfers, no more requests, no more acting like you're someone you're not. That being loved is synonymous with being used. I assumed that cutting her off would make me feel bad. Rather, it was liberating. Her quick return was the one thing that surprised me more than her quiet. At first, the quiet was odd. No dramatic 2 a.m. or Venmo. Ping's voicemails, a single time, attached, and no SMS with emojis of tears. After nearly a year, for the first time, since my phone was silent, I honestly feared that I would feel bad. I assumed I would stay up at night wondering whether she was all right, if she paid her rent, if she fed her dog, or if she would publish some mysterious tale. I would start to doubt everything. Because of it, I didn't feel guilty, though. I was relieved. Overwhelming relief. A sharp, electric shock. It seemed as though bricks that I was unaware were on my chest had been removed. I tidied my flat. I had money left over after paying my own expenditures. I didn't have to deduct Ava's $800 from my weekly budget since I bought groceries for myself. I even scheduled a therapy session that I had been putting off for 6 months, but I haven't heard anything. Not from her, not from her mom, not from anybody in the poisonous, always smiling and constantly demanding group she surrounded herself with like a moat. Right up until day 8, it started at that point. It seemed subtle at first. Cutting people off isn't a sign of strength, according to a popular Instagram remark. It makes you callous. Then a narrative about her sobbing cut to a scene with a fluffy blanket and mascara smudged. Caption, only when you are helpful do some people adore you. I thought I could become blind from rolling my eyes so much. Then the text arrived. Ava, I'm in pain, but I won't plead. I also believed that we were superior to this. I didn't respond. Another Ava the next day. Let me clarify. Please, this must make sense to me. I'm welcome to visit. Simply speak. No response as of yet. And then the escalation, of course. That Saturday, I met her mother in queue at the grocery shop. Is my aunt, oh, you're still here? She smiled icily as she said enough loud for human hearing. Ava said, you have been aloof. I didn't answer. I simply nodded courteously. By Sunday, I had paid for my groceries and departed. Ava's voice had changed entirely. Look, Ava, I didn't want to harm you even though I realize I made a mistake. I went into a panic. As everyone watched, I made an effort to be humorous. It was a joke. I care about you. You've always done so. Don't hate me, please. After a full minute of staring at the screen, I did something I hadn't done since this whole thing started. Setting my phone aside, I stepped outside. I sat in the park with a book, went on a stroll, and had coffee without having to bear the burden of someone else's anxiety. I wasn't a fixer. No more. However, Ava continued. She repeatedly texted, phoned, and left a message that began calmly before breaking down in tears. Rent was no longer the issue or the gathering. It has to do with control. She was spiraling because she could feel it slipping. She played one final card the next evening. She was not alone herself when she returned to my door. Her lover, Brandon Braxton, or whatever name he went by on Pinterest, stood behind her. The same person who watched me leave that rooftop as if I were inconsequential and who chuckled at her joke. His eyes were sad and his hands were in his pockets as he stood on my porch. All we want to do is chat, Ava spoke quietly. I didn't fully open the door. You did it already in front of 30 people. I stated that on your rooftop it wasn't my intention. You took what I said seriously, but I also meant mine. I'm finished. At last. Braxton raised his head. She's been spiraling, Guy. She hasn't slept. She's not feeling well. I cocked my head. When she called me cheap in front of you, did she cry this much? Quiet, I continued. The two of you have each other. She may or may not be able to solve it. However, I'm tired of being the antagonist in a tale where I was the only one who suffered in order to save the life of another. I shut the door after that. Not slammed, not shouted. Simply shut it because borders sound like that. I took the present I gave to her party later that evening. I left that one on the table. She tossed away the one she never even opened. Tossing a receipt to a fraud I never consented to felt like that. And what do you know, I felt no remorse. I felt sanitized. The last update, I put the tale up on the internet. Just for a moment, not out of pity. However, I wasn't prepared for the world's response. I did something I never would have imagined doing a week after I finally said goodbye to Ava. Naturally, I submitted the entire thing anonymously on Reddit using a fictitious username rather than using my real identity. For 11 months, I gave my cousin $800 every week. At her birthday celebration, she referred to me as cheap. Without a word, I walked away. Don't use hashtags. No changes. Just the facts. Within hours, the post went viral. Upvotes from tens of thousands. There were thousands of comments. Every statement is being dissected by others as if I were a character in a twisted drama. It caught me off guard. I had no idea why I had done it. Perhaps I simply had to say it aloud to find out whether she was indeed insane or if I was Reddit too. Reddit didn't mince words. There were some nasty remarks among the top ones. She isn't related to you. For months, she has been emotionally draining you. Cutting her off was the correct thing to do. I would have splattered her face with the cupcake. The ability to wait. You earned $800 a week. Saint level. For half of such insult, I would cut off my own brother. Then the questions appeared, the actual ones, the ones that forced me to ponder instead of scroll. Why did you spend so much time assisting her for you? What was in it? Did you fall for her or something? This generosity sounds more than just that of a relative. This is a serious question. In the worst one, are you certain you weren't attempting to purchase her love? What first led you to believe that you were deserving of such treatment? They were correct, so that one struck a different chord. I wasn't only being giving. Growing up alone, I was attempting to achieve something that I never had. The golden girl, the star had always been Ava. Even as children, I was the quiet, rational, uninteresting cousin who always had extra pencils I felt needed when I helped her. And invisible as you get older, love may feel like need. However, it wasn't. Dependency was the issue. Exploitation adorned with glitter. I was unable to view it once I saw it. I thus made a follow-up post. I have perused your remarks. Excellent, not good, deranged. Here's the reality. I wanted to think that someone could love me and still need me that much, so I assisted her. But quiet isn't required by love. You are not publicly humiliated by love. Your generosity is not currency to love. It is due. I wasn't in love with her then. All I wanted was to be important. And I am important to myself now. For the first time in a single day, that remark received 40 upvotes. It began to be quoted sending me a message with their personal narratives. In the break room, this brought me to tears. I recently stopped my sister's Venmo auto deposit. I'm grateful, man. I left my mom's place with your support. Naturally, not everyone was on board. You're still resentful. From someone who has never been told no, this exudes main character enthusiasm. Perhaps. However, if being the protagonist in my own life makes me resentful, then so be it. I spent too much time being an extra in other people's drama. I no longer send money because I feel bad about it. I don't respond to sob tales in the middle of the night. My phone doesn't vibrate like a slot machine all the time. I go for walks. If someone wants a small item, I prepare meals for just one person. I go to sleep. Ava texted once more the other day. Ava, I miss our previous relationship before all of this. For some reason, this is the first time in my life that I have ever felt at peace, so I didn't reply. Should I pardon her? I'm not sure I believe I do. On certain days. On certain days, I can still picture her expression when she called me cheap. After nearly a year of holding her up like scaffolding, I also understand that she did more than simply steal my money. She attempted to degrade me, and I will never lend anyone anything else again after that. I'm writing this right now, seeing strangers read my life like if it were a book. Some people are happy. Some people wince. Some people don't trust me. Others recognize themselves in it. And perhaps that's why I initially posted it, in case someone else is being exploited in silence, grinning while drowning, and they're wondering whether they're the crazy one for finally refusing. This could make it easier for them to breathe, or perhaps not. Here's what I wonder, although I don't claim to have the answers. If you are only loved by someone when you are helpful, have they ever shown you any love? Story 3. Kevin is my name. Up until around 2 years ago, I was 27. I continued to have faith that my family would change their mind and view me as more than the easy scapegoat they had shaped me into. However, you can't expect people to change just because you want them to. The only thing left to do is to stop hoping and begin remembering who you are when they double down. I was the eldest of 3 children growing up. Then came the golden kid, Rachel, and the unintentional caboose Eric, who was too young to have any influence on family affairs. It most likely appeared that we were near from the outside, behind the scenes. I was supposed to clean up everyone's filth, even though there were family vacation pictures Facebook remarks, and the typical digital facade. I spent all of my money to assist Rachel keep it a secret so she wouldn't lose her internship after she smashed her car while she was a college student. I covertly paid the power bill after Mom failed to pay it for 3 consecutive months, blaming it on Eric's video game playing. Thank you, but no. You're only meant to give your family a vague well and a head tilt, right? For years, I continued to do it every favor, each and every dime. Every bit of emotional work, I did it without resistance. I believed that if I continued to show up, they could eventually perceive me as someone of whom they might be proud. Last November, that illusion was destroyed. It was supposed to be a typical afternoon. Brandon, Rachel's longtime partner, just proposed to Rachel. He always seemed to me to be one of those innocuously uninteresting sorts, although we weren't close. He shouted stuff like, "Killer spread misses," while wearing both shoes to Thanksgiving. You see. Nevertheless, I was very delighted for her. I hoped that this would be the turning point for us all. I congratulated her by SMS. I offered to assist in any way I could. And as a wedding present, I even offered to pay for their honeymoon. I didn't give it much thought when she gave me a half-hearted check in response. Then 2 weeks ago, while I was finishing up at work, my mother called. I'm still not sure if she intended for the poison in her voice to come through or whether she truly didn't mind that I heard it. Don't even consider attending the wedding. Before I could say hi, she snapped, "We won't allow you to spoil Rachel's day, which she deserves to have the best possible start." For a moment, I remained silent as I tried to understand what she was saying. I had no intention of giving a speech or doing anything ostentatious. All I intended to do was come there, give appropriate claps, and perhaps give a few folks hugs. Destroy it. How slowly, I asked. When she tried to hide something unpleasant, she always employed that sickly sweet tone in her voice. Kevin. The part has never really fit you. I assume you are aware of it. You constantly dress as though you're attending a bad job interview. It's also unsettling the way you loiter around it. You're not welcome in the pictures, Rachel. To be honest, I agree with her when she asks me to inform you. For a moment, I was unable to breathe. My ears seemed to be ringing. Over the years, I had gone above and above for them. All the work to be helpful. I was now being informed that I didn't even merit a seat at the wedding, and that by merely being there, I had somehow damaged their idyllic little family image. In the distance, I could hear Rachel chuckling dismissively, as if this whole situation were an inside joke. But let him know he may send a present. She yelled. He is still capable of that. I didn't speak louder. I didn't shout or stand up for myself. I simply grinned. I used to offer my employer the same smile when he attempted to dump his job on me. The one who claims you don't know what I'm going to do. Yes, I replied in a casual tone. I get it. Without saying another word, she hung up. In 5 seconds, I reverted the $200 transfer back into my pocket by opening my laptop and logging into the joint account I had created for the honeymoon present. I sent my mother a text message with a little caption after taking a screenshot of the reversal. I don't want to do any damage. I know she saw it, but she didn't respond. She obsessively reads messages all the time. This is where they truly don't know. I made a covert investment in a chain of mid-tier venues that were having trouble recovering from the epidemic last year. Rachel boasted about scheduling one of them on Instagram. And it just so happened to be the same spot. Lakeview Ridge, the one with the expensive brunch menu and the large white gazebo. I checked my emails twice as soon as I saw it in her article. Yes. It was included in our portfolio. Not only did I own a portion of it, but I also had the authority to approve all major events that took place there, including weddings. Initially, I thought of canceling the reservation right away and watching them panic. However, that seemed too simple and too fast. It would not be felt by them. It would be incomprehensible to them. I wished they had a bit more time to wallow in their own self-satisfaction. I asked them to share their debates about the seating plan, their dress fittings, and their countdown stories. I wanted a couple more times for them to laugh behind my back. I've been observing and waiting patiently instead. I called the Lakeview Ridge event planner a couple times in private to inquire about any worries or problems about the Carsons' wedding reservation. The contract is flawless, I can assure you of that, with the exception of one little provision tucked away in the fine print. 10 days before to the event, full payment is needed. Otherwise, the reservation is deemed forfeited rather than postponed. Not delayed, refused. 12 days remain till the wedding. Furthermore, no last payment has been made as of this morning. There was nothing I needed to accomplish yet. Simply wait. Observe. Allow them to continue ignoring me as a burden. They would want to be cropped out of the photos. Allow them to continue grinning for the camera. They have no idea that the one person they thought was unworthy of standing next to them lay the floor on which they are standing. Once the money was no longer given to them in quiet, it was remarkable how fast people forgot where it originated from. Since that phone conversation, neither Rachel nor my mother had spoken to me, not even a little bit. As a peace offering, perhaps you might attend the rehearsal dinner. Nothing, just smugness and stillness. That's the problem with quiet, though. You can hear anything they don't say out, thanks to it. I did something I hadn't done in a long time during the following several days. Living my life without them. I went back to the gym, cleaned my apartment. For once, I took myself out to supper. Requests for favors and urgent money transfers weren't flooding my phone. It was quiet. Calm in the sense that it is earned similar to the quiet before a managed storm. However, I received a message from Amy, the venue planner, 5 days before to the wedding. During her years at Lakeview Ridge, she witnessed more family breakdowns than a therapist. She is calm, attentive, and a bit too perceptive for her own good. Although her communication was brief and kind, The underlying meaning was quite obvious. Kevin, hello, I wanted to check in. The last payment has still not been made by the Carson party. 2 reminders have gone unanswered. Tell me how you wish to approach it. I gave her a call back that afternoon and we discussed it because the deadline is approaching. I spoke in a professional, yet informal, tone. According to our policy, the reservation will be deemed void if payment is not received by the due date. Simply abide by the terms of the contract. Amy paused. Are you certain they're actually relying on this after all? There is discussion of releasing doves during the vows, and there are about 15 vendors planned to perform a live string quartet. I gave a little smile. Classy doves, she chuckled softly. All right, in 2 days, I will adhere to procedural deadlines. I could have alerted them now. I could have sent Rachel a straightforward text message saying, hey, just so you know, your payments are late. However, I didn't, since they explicitly said that I wasn't family. Not significant enough to appear in a picture, too insignificant to merit a chair, not much more than a walking wallet. At that point, I made the decision not to become involved. I was going to let the inevitable fallout from their negligence take care of everything. I took the day off work and treated myself to a nice breakfast on the morning of the deadline. Eggs, coffee, bacon that is extra crispy. Around lunchtime, I checked my email. Nothing at all. No money, not a message. Hail Mary. No, we forgot. Oh God. Radio silence. At 7:18 p.m. that evening, Amy entered the reservation as canceled in our system. I didn't recognize the number that called me. I let the voicemail go 30 seconds later. One more call. The same figure. At last I picked up. Hello, is this Kevin? It's Teresa. Rachel's wedding is being planned by me. I almost burst out laughing. It was, of course. Yes, I replied in a neutral tone. We're merely attempting to resolve a small venue issue. I am aware that the final payment was unsuccessful due to a system malfunction of some sort. We wanted to make sure everything is still on schedule for Saturday, even if it's likely an issue with our account. I reclined in my chair and looked up at the ceiling. There is no system fault. Last night, the payment deadline passed. The reservation is now open. Quiet. Her breathing and the muted sound of an argument in the background were audible to me. Then she spoke again, anxious and thin. However, you must be able to create an exception, right? This is something that only comes along once in a lifetime. The bride has already received her dress. Visitors are arriving via plane, Teresa. I gently interrupted. I get it, but the contract is what it is. They ought to have made the payment on schedule if they wanted it locked in. We have sent out plenty of reminders. She trailed off with a weak voice, stammering a little. I will speak with Rachel. Less than an hour later, there was another call. It was Mom this time, Kevin. She let out a bark. No salutations. What's happening at the location? Rachel is crying. They claimed that you were the reason the reservation was canceled. I arched an eyebrow. Me? Nothing was canceled by me. The cutoff time has gone. The organizer occurred to be someone I knew. You knew, yet you remained silent. You allowed this to occur. I allowed what transpired. Do you mean I didn't cover for your error once more? A little stillness fell. Her voice then became icy. Is your hatred of your sister truly so great? No, I spoke clearly and slowly. I've finally made the decision to stop allowing you guys to treat me like a throwaway object. I removed myself from the photograph because you thought I would taint it. You must always put yourself first. She spat. No. I repeated this time more quietly. Did you? The moment you decided I wasn't worthy of a cheer at your ideal wedding, you turned it all around on me. I'm just doing as you say. That evening, she hung up without saying anything more. Rachel sent me a text, no salutations, no emoticons, only. This, really? You couldn't have forewarned us. Then a moment later, whoa, you're a resentful young guy. I didn't respond. I didn't have to because I had complete control over the following step. The location was no longer there. There was no basis for their ideal wedding. They were still unaware of how far down this rabbit hole was, and vendors were leaving while many remained in cages. Because I was sitting on a little secret as they were frantically trying to find a last-minute venue. The worst they believed had already occurred. They were unaware that I was not finished yet. Not even close. I woke up the next morning to 3 missed calls and a dozen fresh texts. 1 from Brandon, 2 from Rachel. The texts varied from guilt trips that were barely disguised. Kevin, this is still family, regardless of the fate of outright insults. It's unbelievable how petty you are. You would ruin the wedding of your own sister. I went through them all. Coffee went through without responding. They were unaware of the full extent of it. You see, Rachel and Brandon had been promoting their wedding like it was a royal occasion for the last year. Engagement pictures in the manner of magazines. A personalized web page including a countdown. 4 gentle champagne hues make up the color scheme. The venue was the complete brand. Not simply a lovely setting. Every one of their posts on the internet included Lakeview Ridge as the background their board on Pinterest. There was even a watercolor drawing of a gazebo on the RSVP envelopes. They constructed their carefully constructed dream using borrowed funds and the kindness of others, including me. They hadn't disclosed to anyone that I was covering the honeymoon expenses. They accepted the cash grind for Instagram and pretended that Brandon had simply made it up. The worst thing, they made me proud. The ugly brother obviously didn't match the idea, even though I really wanted them to start off beautifully. And now the clock was running out. 4 days remained. They were frantically looking for a new location. And I was familiar with the inside workings of that process. At so short notice, nothing good was available, certainly not one that could hold the amount of visitors they were anticipating. Everything would need to be redone, including their ceremony setup and floral arrangements, even if they managed to find a backup. What's the actual kicker? They boasted about the unique deal they secured at Lakeview Ridge for months. They were unaware that I had instructed Amy, the organizer, to give them that rate without the embarrassment. I wanted to give it as a gift, that pricing was gone now that the reservation was null and invalid. Even if they were able to reschedule, it would cost them twice as much if we allowed them to return. That afternoon, I received another call, this one from Brandon. Kevin, hello. Listen, I wanted to make things clear even though I know there has been some tension. Man to man, I remained silent and allowed him to twist. He cleared his throat. Look, this wedding has really upset Rachel. She finds great meaning in it, to us both. I'm confident we can come up with a solution, as if you're connected at the location. We could return to Brandon if you pull a few strings. Calmly, I asked if you were aware that I was covering the cost of your honeymoon. He remained silent for a moment. What the honeymoon? You two posted about a resort package that included a private chef and a villa. I was that person. $4 or $200. 2 months ago, I sent it. Yes, I was unaware of that. You didn't, of course. Your fiancé didn't want you to, so I said I'd ruin the pictures. She said that I was not welcome there. Thus, I reclaimed the honeymoon. And you want me to intervene and save the wedding. Now, one more pause. When he realized he hadn't completed the homework, I pictured him sitting there and looking at the wall like a child. I'm not attempting to pick a side. His voice became quieter as he spoke. However, I don't think you realize how anxious Rachel is. It's her day. It nearly made me chuckle. Oh, I see. I simply don't give a damn anymore. Click. Amy sent me an email 3 hours later with an update on Carson's in the subject line. I took it open. To put it briefly, Rachel had contacted the venue in tears saying that the cancellation had caught her off guard and that it was unjust and very unethical. She insisted on having a direct conversation with the owner. Amy inquired if I would like a personal response. Not yet, I informed her. Instead, I did something better. I logged into the venue's website back end and added a small update to their homepage. Please note, Lakeview Ridge is proud to host a private corporate event on April 27th. No wedding bookings will be honored on this date. That was their wedding day. I didn't use their names. I didn't have to. Anyone looking for a last-minute rebooking would see it. Every other venue in the neighborhood would believe we were booked solid. I had just gently switched out the lights on every backup plan they had that night. My aunt messaged me and Claire texted, "Hi, honey. Can we talk? Rachel is inconsolable. Your mother is inconsolable." I looked at it for a long time. I said I'd spoil her pictures, she said. That was taken seriously by me. I was left on read by her. The group conversation exploded the following morning. Not my. Theirs, screenshots were sent to me by my cousin. I know that my mother was upset and blamed Mercury in retrograde Amy and myself. She went on a tirade about how she went out of her way to include me and how this wasn't how family treated one another. Rachel added a brilliant comment. Since high school, he has been envious. I was always aware that he would somehow make it about his jealousy. That word struck like a silk-wrapped fist and slap. What is the object of jealousy? The well-chosen spotlight. Fake praises and whispered betrayals were her constant companions. I had worked silently as they posed for photos, building all I possessed. I provided without expecting praise, it seems, that I was resentful that I had not allowed them to burn me alive again. So I decided I told Amy to reply right away after forwarding everything to her. Inform them that after considering the circumstances, the owner rejected the rebooking request. Then I grabbed the phone and called someone else. Carter, a buddy of mine, has a posh catering business in the heart of town. I owed him a favor. I requested a small item from him for Saturday. Not much, just a little business luncheon, 10 individuals, the same day. At the same moment, same location. He chuckled. Would you like me to reserve the venue for their wedding day? Don't just reserve it. I requested pictures. Instagram, the process. Mark the location. The occasion. Make it appear to be the year's greatest catered event. He remained silent for a moment. Is this what you're doing? Kevin, I grinned. I won't attend the wedding since they requested me not to. However, that didn't mean I wouldn't make an impression. The fresh air that brides long for arrived on Saturday. No clouds to be seen. With the lake at Lakeview Ridge still reflecting like glass and soft sunshine filtered through early spring leaves, the white gazebo shone against a background of blossoming cherry trees. It was lovely, ideal, and completely different from what Rachel had anticipated. I wanted to enjoy every moment, so I got up early that morning rather than because I had to. To feel a bit sharper. I spent my time taking a shower, making a wonderful cup of coffee, and even ironing my shirt that I didn't wear. After that, I saw the mayhem develop in real time while sitting at the window with my phone in hand. Rachel's college roommate, a distant relative, posted the first post. A bewildered selfie taken in her car. Is the location closed? I just arrived and the gate is unanswered. Let me know whether I'm the only one who didn't receive a notification about the cancellation. I sat down, reloaded the computer, and watched the bridesmaids in full makeup standing with their arms crossed outside the gate that was shut. The guys in rented tuxedos walking next to parked cars and a flower girl dozing off in someone's back seat with her tiara falling off. No one had been informed. One hadn't anticipated that section. I assumed my mother or Rachel would have repaired the harm. Send out a bulk text at the very least. However, they were so certain that everything would be okay. Of course, I would intervene at the last minute to save them without even alerting their visitors. The entitlement became paralyzing. The post that made me laugh aloud then appeared today. Lakeview Ridge is throwing a lovely luncheon by the lake for a special team. To celebrate major victories. Nothing beats a little sunshine, fresh air, and delicious cuisine. Hashtag a private gathering. Hashtag is fully booked. Hashtag luxury for businesses. There is a champagne pyramid in the background. 3 long tables covered with white crystal glasses and servers wearing black vests. Rachel's unique floral arch, which was used for our luncheon's dessert bar, was barely noticeable, yet memorable. Carter's crew reversed the sign she had painted, "Forever Starts Here," by an Etsy artisan, and lettered it to read, "Success Starts Here." I would have loved to see her face at noon. Amy gave me a call. I picked it up right away. "Kevin," she murmured, hardly holding back her laughter. "The side fence is being attempted to be climbed by our guests." I chuckled. "Tell me that's a joke, please." "Not at all." Inside. "One of the groom's guys claims to know someone. I informed them that security has been alerted and that the property is under private reservation. The doves are brought by them." "Yes, indeed, crate and 2 handlers." They appear to be rather perplexed as they sit on the curb. I laughed once more, this time more slowly. "Amy, you've been incredible, really. For this, I owe you a great deal," she said. "You owe me nothing. I haven't worked a better Saturday shift in years than this one." The inevitable happened at 2:41 p.m. My mother called, I let it to ring, then my Aunt Brandon Rachel, and finally myself. I didn't respond to any of them. Rather, I clicked on the group text that I was still in without speaking, despite the fact that they penned just 2 sentences and ceased tagging me months ago. "You're welcome." I then ended the conversation. My younger brother Eric, the only family member who had ever regarded me like a real person, called me that evening. The wedding was not attended by him. The day after I took out the honeymoon monies, he gave me a call. "If they're going to pretend you don't exist, say so. I'm not trying to make them seem like saints." He remained silent out of deference. However, it was clear from his voice that he had had enough. He didn't say much. "Eric, I noticed the posts. I am at a loss for words. But you have my admiration. It was necessary to humble them. Tomorrow I'll give you a call." And I felt it for once. Not only relief, not just pride, finalization, because this is the problem. Individuals like Rachel, similar to my mom, their universe is based on appearances, seating charts, dress fits, perceptions, and the stories they will share over a drink in 5 years. I provided them more than simply a wedding gone wrong. It was a broken delusion. Her clothing was so beautiful that no one would ever recall. They would recall spending 2 hours in high heels outside a secured location. The doves that never flew would be in their memory. While the wedding guests stood in the parking lot, a business team was fed brunch. The queries were murmured. How come they didn't pay? Did they not have assistance? After a while, someone might bring up the possibility that Rachel wasn't the victim. Perhaps the sibling she attempted to silence had just had enough. My mother arrived at my door 2 days later. She didn't knock. She beat. After a minute of waiting, I carefully opened it. She seemed worn out. She had creases around her eyes where her mascara had faded. Her tone remained strong, despite her bent stance and crumpled coat. "Do you believe you have proven anything?" she inquired. "No," I responded coolly. "I am certain that I did." "Your sister was embarrassed by you." She caught my attention for a long time. I was humiliated by her. For years, you did too. You simply assumed I would continue to take it, that I would always arrive tidy up and be silent. No more. She took a step forward as if to argue, as if she had planned a speech. I didn't allow her any room, though. I purchased the space. The honeymoon was paid for by me when no one else stood by this family. I did. You were brought up with an eye for aesthetics. Thus, you were able to raise her this time. She was shaking as she stood there. She said nothing else, though. You can see that I'm not upset. I concluded I am at liberty. Nothing on a registry would be a nicer present than that. I then closed the door. After a month, there were 2. They didn't get back to me. I now go out to eat twice a week with Eric. We discussed work, regarding life. At times, we even chuckled over the year's biggest wedding fiasco. People who had attended the event had sent me a few subtle messages congratulating me, but they didn't exactly explain what they were congratulating me on. And it was sufficient. A procession wasn't necessary for me. I didn't require a time in the spotlight. I was at ease. I was in charge. I also had a family that I picked rather than one that attempted to exclude me from their ideal for the first time in years. I then took the